Okay, good evening, everybody. Tonight is a continuation of 4 live streams. This is the second on the topic of non-dual meditation. You're probably tired of hearing this, but I noticed in the past that my audio goes out of sync. And I noticed that other YouTubers are having the same experience with live streams right now. So I don't know what's causing it, but it's easy to fix. So if you're watching, would you please let me know by saying hello, giving me a like, and then letting me know if the audio is synced or not. If the audio is synced, then we are good to go. So, So non-duality is both a topic, and it's also, thanks Leah, and it's also a style of, it's a style of meditation, but it's also a style of experience. Non-duality itself is an idea that is, happy Thursday to you, Deborah, is an idea that is set in opposition to duality. And duality is the kind of everyday experience that we have from the beginning of our life until our death, where our experience is composed of 2 things. That's the duality. The duo of those 2 things is the sense of self and other is generally the world. It's generally everything that we see in the world. We see our glass of water. We see the screen in front of us. That duality characterizes human life. That duality is built off of the experience we have of being a separate self. And of course, being a separate self is normal. There's nothing unusual or particularly bad, well, nothing bad about that. But a type of ignorance can accumulate in our life that goes unrecognized when we take the self, the feeling of me, to be something more than it actually is. That is the dualistic perspective of what the Buddhist tradition calls ignorance. We aren't seeing things accurately. We're seeing them with a layer of confusion, and we're taking them to be real. This would be similar to if we were watching a movie at the theater, watching the screen, and somehow thinking that we were part of the movie. Our body might be flinching when things are happening. We're so invested in the appearances on the screen that we've lost the sense of what we actually are. Now, in a sense, that's what movies are trying to do. I think they call that the fictive dream. They're trying to bring us into the fictive dream where we believe that we're part of it. And again, nothing wrong with that. Some point long ago, the early population of meditators began to explore the depths of the mind that were available through developing states of concentration. And as various meditators in various places in India explored this, they gave names to it. And sometimes they would give names to states of consciousness that to us sound like they're talking about gods. So, for example, Shiva. Shiva is, if you know what Shiva is, you probably think of Shiva as a Hindu god. And Shiva is often depicted exactly that way, as a god in the mountains in a meditation posture. Shiva also is a term that means the fundamental, unconfused awareness within someone. So the practice of Shiva for a meditator may have nothing to do with any type of God or external figure at all. It may simply be a practice of awareness. Now, the Buddhists, they did a little bit of that later on, but at first they just tried to be descriptive. They just tried to be descriptive of the experience. And so what we end up with are Buddhist terms that are extremely technical and detailed. And it might be a lot to hear at first, but it certainly can be helpful. So far in this little journey together, we're talking about non-duality. And in the first live stream, which was last week, what is this? This is, so I guess this was, what, Monday? We talked about what non-duality is and what non-dual meditation is, what the whole concept is. So if you're just tuning in for the first time tonight, this will still be interesting. You don't have to have listened to the first one, but you might want to go back and listen to that. That's where I really break down the elements of what this is so that we can begin to approach it and understand it and hopefully experience it and let it transform us. Tonight, we're going to talk about I guess how to learn it, or how it is learned, how it becomes a reality in our life, how it begins. I think that's what I titled this live stream, How It Begins. And then next time, on Monday, we'll talk about how it progresses. So tonight we'll end with the critical event that happens in order for us to be actual non-dual meditators. And then next time we'll talk about how, based on that event having happened, our meditation will progress. And that's usually a very interesting one for people who are already practicing, because whenever anyone talks about non-dual practice these days, they're not really talking about how to get into it, how to learn it, how to familiarize yourself with it, how to adjust to it. They seem more into it. They seem interested in talking about what happens because of it, the outcome. I can understand why. I mean, that's more exciting, but if that's all we're hearing about, then we become impatient and we don't understand why we aren't experiencing those outcomes right away. If everyone we listen to is only talking about freedom and total liberation from fear, first of all, if that person is genuinely accomplished in that way, where they are liberated from duality completely, they always see dualistic experience as an illusion and they're resting in their non-dual nature, that's a pretty high accomplishment. In my tradition, where my teachers are the Mahamudra and Dzogchen teachers most of them have been training since they were children, and their parents and grandparents and uncles and aunts were all practitioners. So there really isn't anyone in the world who has practiced more than those people. The Mahamudra and Dzogchen practitioners probably have stacked up more meditation experience of this type than any other group in the world. I don't think that is a controversial thing to say. I think it's just facts, Just like top surgeons have probably logged more time in surgery than anyone else. And you would expect that. Well, these types of teachers, they spend a lot of time helping students understand how to get into the non-dual experience so that it is something that they can enter legitimately and begin a true path from there. They don't try to just pop you into an experience so you can have a little adventure. It isn't like that. That wouldn't help you. It might give you a sort of a wow moment, but you wouldn't have the tools to turn that into anything. Non-dual practice is non-dual practice. Non-dual awakening comes from non-dual practice. And at least the way I think of it, practice means meditation practice. Now, there are two types of meditation practice, which I think we've talked about before. One is the practice where you're actually doing something. And so meditation is becoming familiar with a meditation object. That's what the word meditation means. It means to familiarize yourself with an object. The Tibetan word for this is gompa, means familiarization. There's also a type of meditation called me-gom. So it's the same word with an M-E in front of it, and that's a negative. And we translate that as non-meditation. Non-meditation is the type of meditation you're doing when you have acquired the non-dual view. You're meditating up until you actually acquire the non-dual view. And once you've acquired the non-dual view, you release yourself from the doing element of meditation, and you engage in what's called non-meditation. But the thing about it is once you enter into that stage of non-meditation, you're probably going to be spending more time in meditation training, or at least in what would we call it, like time-delineated sessions of meditation. So you might be able to handle 20 or 30 minutes of meditation in the early days, following your breath, trying to stabilize your mind, becoming familiar with how thoughts and emotions come and go, just sort of getting to know the inner landscape. That's okay. Sorry about that. Man, let me know if I am synced. Wonder what happened. How does this happen? John and Clint, please let me know, and then I will proceed with confidence. Am I synced? Okay. You guys aren't letting me know, but I'll just keep going and hope that I am. When you are learning the ropes, thanks, Clint, when you're learning the ropes of meditation, you're spending time sort of doing nothing, but you actually are doing something. You are directing attention and building the faculty of mind called mindfulness, or trempa. Trempa is the ability of the mind to find the thing you're supposed to be meditating on and holding on to it so that you can begin to understand it. And that is a doing practice, but it's an important doing practice. I mean, that's how you build the strength and clarity of the mind. So there's no reason why you wouldn't want to do plenty of that. But once you come to the point of acquiring the non-dual view, you don't use mindfulness anymore. Mindfulness was helpful in the first stage of meditation, but mindfulness doesn't really have a role in non-dual meditation. It has a very tiny role, so slight that teachers prefer to just say you're not using mindfulness, and I'll just go with that. But the thing about it is, once you've acquired the non-dual view, it's not as if you don't meditate anymore. You probably meditate 2 or 3 times longer because you can. You can at that point. You acquire the view, you sit down on your cushion or in your chair, and rather than spending 20 or 30 minutes, which in the early days might be as much as you can handle, in this case, you can easily meditate for an hour. You can meditate for 2 hours. And you need to do that because you are learning to familiarize yourself with the non-dual experience. Nobody pops into the non-dual experience and never leaves it. That's just a story. I mean, that sounds great, but it does not happen. We have thousands of years of the best minds of these eras taking up these practices with all of their heart and dedicating their entire lives to do whatever it takes to stabilize this. And so we know what it is that it takes. When you read the works of some of these teachers, you realize the caliber of person that has come before you. The people like Jamgon Kongtrul or Longchenpa or Nagarjuna or Chandrakirti or Atisha or Asanga or Vasubandhu. These are amazing, amazing meditators with tremendous knowledge, tremendous heart, philosophical understanding, and fearlessness. Some of these, Milarepa is another one. Some of these people simply left their lives and went into the caves of Tibet and just lived on sampa, which is ground barley, and yak butter mixed into tea, and would spend all of their time in meditation for years on end. That's the type of dedication that produces enlightened people, truly enlightened people. There's no one in any of these traditions. There's no one in any of these traditions who just like heard from someone about non-duality and just was there. I mean, there are lots of people who thought they were, but they always have a sort of coming to Buddha moment, where they realized they'd been trapped in a thought of non-duality. Now, the easiest thing to happen when you start practicing non-duality, the easiest thing is that you have a deep conceptual experience of non-duality, and it's powerful, and it's almost joyfully disorienting, and you realize that something has shifted in you. Something has shifted, but nothing deep. You just have a deeper layer of concept which feels like a change in your life. But what's happened is your mind, the part of you that thinks, has a very stable layer within it which can sustain concept that's way more refined than any concept you've ever had before. But because you've been interacting with teachings that point to the ultimate, you begin to have a very high-class idea of the ultimate. This is a very good thing. It's an essential thing. It's called a conceptual view, or the idea. We talked about this in the last live stream. But that idea, that conceptual view, can be so powerful that you think it's the actual thing and you think you've arrived at the goal. You haven't. You haven't. You're still in the mind. You're in a very good place in the mind. You're at sort of the place from which your next move will be to springboard into the genuine non-dual experience. But it's just important that we manage our expectations, especially in this world where everyone is trying to dive into the ultimate right away. People are clearly in pain. They're looking for answers, and the non-dual material that's out there, it sounds like, oh my God, this is just something I can just do right now. You can do it right now, but you can't achieve it right now. You're going to take as much time as anyone's ever taken. We aren't better meditators than the 2,000 years of people that came before us that dedicated all their time to it. But we can be just as good as them. We just have to be realistic. And rather than settling for something which might be it and never is, we want to go all the way into the real thing. So We have what it is, how to learn it, how it progresses, which will be fun. That's next time. And then the things that get in the way. Like I was writing here, one of the things that really does get in the way, and these aren't really bad things, but they're distractions. They're irrelevant to this journey. Once you have found the path into non-dual experience, you are in the home stretch. You really don't need your other practices at this point. I mean, there's nothing wrong with still doing those other practices, but you have to understand that you're now cooking with gas. And this other stuff was like your Fisher-Price kitchen toy set that you had. So like things that often get in our way are we start taking an interest in methods like mantras or visualizations, or because it's new to us and it sounds like it's somehow exciting, we get interested in the inner energy network of chakras and visions. That's low-grade stuff. In every situation, that is not profound. That's just there. And visualizations and opening chakras and stuff, it's kind of like cracking your joints. That's all it is. It's not how you attain this level of awakening. In fact, if you can bypass having to do that, you're lucky. So you don't want to have to work with your chakras. You don't want to have to work with visualization and mantra if you don't have to. Now, if you, like I've just been trained by all these Tibetan teachers who gave me all of these practices to do, all of these visualization practices, mantra practices, energetic practices, chakra practices, all that stuff, because it's part of the tradition. And I didn't know what I was getting into when I was in my 20s. And the thing about it is, when you learn this stuff, if you learn the real thing, that's the only thing you want to learn. If you learn that stuff, is you want to learn the real thing from someone who's actually accomplished it, which means they've probably spent 20 years or so doing intensive practice. They've probably done 3 years, 6 years, or 9 years of retreat, practicing 12 to 16 hours a day. That's who can teach this stuff. That's the level of expertise it takes. But here's the thing. When me and my friends were all learning back in the 90s, we just found teachers who seemed to be legitimate and learned from them. And we learned everything that they taught. We didn't really know please teach us. And so we learned from these great Mahamudra and Dzogchen masters, and they brought us in to these really complicated practices with mantras and visualizations and chakra stuff and subtle body energetic stuff. And when you are given those practices, you are given them with the agreement that you will do them. You do them for the rest of your life. Like if you have 3 or 4 varieties of those, you might not have to do, depending on the teacher or the tradition, you might not have to do every single one of those practices every single day of your life, but you have to do something. And I don't want to say I don't regret that stuff. I don't regret that I learned Vajrayana. But when I advise people these days, I tell them, take it easy. Don't jump into that. That's like getting married and not being able to get divorced. And if you can grasp the inner path, the non-dual meditation path, you don't need to do that stuff. And even those great teachers who teach that stuff will tell you that, like, well, sure, if you can just do Mahamudra, which is a non-dual meditation path, then sure, you could just do Mahamudra. If you can do Dzogchen, which is a non-dual meditation path, just like Mahamudra, well, then you don't need to do this other stuff. But it's part of their culture. And the thing is, they love that stuff. They absolutely love it. And I have Western friends who they'll spend a couple hours a day going through these intricate visualization practices. They love it. some people do. So maybe you want to do it, but it is, you're reading through liturgies and you're doing visualizations and saying mantras. And the whole point is so that you can eventually dissolve all that and just rest in the non-dual state. So if you can rest in the non-dual state to begin with, then you can bypass the need to do all that other stuff. Now, anyone here who's already practicing Vajrayana, Guru Yoga, or Yidam practice, or the 6 yogas of Naropa, or Dream Yoga, or any of that stuff, please. I'm not saying that none of that stuff is good. Good for you. I mean, you know how difficult that is. You know what a time commitment that is, and how sometimes just showing up with the energy it takes to do those practices every day feels like heroic. I'm primarily speaking to people who haven't made those decisions yet. They've turned their attention to awakening. They've heard about it, and they want to know more about it. And so they're going to start looking for sources of training and information, which is terrific because there are so many good teachers out there. But the very best teachers that I've ever come across are teachers who are very likely to give you additional practices too, because in their mind, of course you want to do those things, because everyone wants to do those types of practice. Everyone in India, Tibet, Nepal, Bhutan does. You might not. And the thing is, last time I'll say it, you might not need to. Give yourself a few years of non-dual practice and good meditation training. And if you want more juice in there, well then, start studying with someone who has additional levels of meditative technology, someone from the Mahamudra tradition probably, or from the Dzogchen tradition. And, if you watch my channel, you'll see the people who I thumbs up, because there are a lot of excellent, excellent teachers out there, and you don't have to struggle to study with them. You just have to make the time and go to where they're teaching, and everything's cool. You'll meet cool people and have a meditation network. But that might not be the way to start out. Okay, that might not be the way to start out. So that's all by the way, that's all in this topic of obstacles and enhancements. Not next time, but the time after that, I'll get into the obstacles that I see us all have, not all of us have, but the obstacles that we encounter in our world, our particular Western world. There are obstacles to this practice that we have got to be awake to, because they will sideline our life completely. We will not realize that we have left the road and we have gone down a sidetrack. We don't have anyone in our world who's looking out for us, because nobody understands this stuff. And when we look at the people who really do understand this stuff, they understand this stuff in the context of a culture which is really different from ours. It's a good culture. It's not quite as, technologically advanced, but there's a lot of good heart in it, and they're just as intelligent as we are. So they're just, they value other things. And those are the people from whom we get these amazing meditation traditions. So, learning this stuff really opens your world. Rather than just being a person who lives locally and thinks locally, you're an English-speaking person who lives in the West, and this is your world, and you know Washington or Chicago or San Francisco or Tulsa or Paris or London or whatever, and that's just your world. Well, when you start meditating in a deep way, you start realizing how vast the network of other meditators is. And you start to feel like that's actually another dimension of your family. It's like you found your people. And it's exciting. That's exciting. Yo, Chris, nice to see you. Good to see old meditators show up. So there's the obstacles, and then there are the enhancements. And the enhancements are exciting also. These are the things that you do. Once you've discovered the non-dual view and you're working at stabilizing it, which is what we're going to talk about today, there are things that you can do within that which build up the power and the luminosity of it, and also which just open your feeling world. You know, a lot of us are stuck and frozen in our mind. We're so agitated in our life. There's so much bad news that we've pulled in. We're almost numb. We don't want any more information. Our heart is closing down to protect itself. I mean, it makes sense. I feel this happening. But there are things we can do which get that heart healthy again. And in order for the heart to be healthy again, we have to be unafraid of the world we're living in. And the only thing that's genuinely going to help us become unafraid of the world we're living in is the non-dual view. That's what it's always been about. That's what the Buddha was. The Buddha was someone who had completely gone beyond fear. Through what? Through the non-dual view. I mean, that's, you know, right? That's what Buddhism is. When we talk about non-dual traditions, Buddhism is probably the biggest one in the world. It's the biggest, deepest, most extensive. There's another tradition which is as old or even a little older called Advaita Vedanta, or there's also the Shaivist traditions. Those are also non-dual schools. They're magnificent, but they're not as extensive. They're not as available. And I got to say it, they're not as well established. And well established is what we want. So, you know, just because I know that some people probably are going to watch this and they're going to have come in from an Advaita Vedanta or Hindu perspective, I want to make it clear that I totally respect those traditions. It's even how I started before I found the Buddhist traditions. I see the Hindu traditions as things that I really want to study and read and steep in and appreciate. But it's the Buddhist stuff that I want to practice because it is more thoroughly supported, and there is a much bigger network of expert teachers in the world who really know that stuff, really know it. It's just far more well established for us. So just going to leave it at that. So let's get in to tonight's thing. So non-duality tonight is how to learn it. So how does it begin? Non-dual meditation, non-dual awakening, non-dual experience, the non-dual view. It begins in our life. How? Well, it begins through a sequence. And so I'm basing this, I have 4 sequences here, and I am basing this shamelessly off the 3 stages that is well known to any Buddhist practitioner of hearing, contemplating, and meditating. So hearing, contemplating, and meditating, which I'll talk a little bit about tonight, I think, it's just sort of the universal way that a human being takes in something new, understands it, and then incorporates it as part of their world. In this case, I'm just making it a little easier to understand. So we have hearing about it. Non-duality begins in our life first when we hear about it. That's necessary. After hearing about it, we start to take it seriously. And we're getting ready to talk about each one of these. So we hear about it, and then we take it seriously. By taking it seriously, we come to understand that it really is saying something provocative, and we turn our attention inward. And then we have an aha moment, and we understand at some very embryonic way the reality that this is pointing to. It's not an idea at that point. It's a eureka moment. And then we take that little experience and we deepen it. And that's the path of non-dual practice. D, wait, I'm never going to know how to do this. D is the beginning of the path of true non-dual practice. C is the condition which makes that path possible. B and A are how we begin to find it. So you could say that C is like finding a golden key. We know that it unlocks something, but we have the key now. D is beginning to put the key in the lock. And when we finally get it in the lock, it opens up, and that would be non-dual awakening, which we talked a little bit about last time. So now we're going to drill down into these. Hearing about it is important. In the Tibetan tradition, this is called nyingpa. We hear something that isn't like anything we've heard before. So we might be on YouTube, and we might see one of the non-dual teachers or someone who's been influenced by a non-dual teacher say something about there really is no self. I mean, the self is just a story that you've been living with. There's actually, that is seen to just be a fabrication of the mind. We hear that. That's different than just, we kind of are listening to it and then we scroll to something else. No, this person says this and it strikes us. It strikes us. Maybe sometimes people say, it stopped my mind. I can remember when I first heard this. I was probably 19. I was working in a coffee shop, and there was a guy who used to come in to do all of his research and all of his writing. He was sort of an independent scholar of Russian science journals, and he had spent many years of his life in India, where he met some of these, I didn't know this at the time, he was just the guy who was always in the cafe, and he'd spent a lot of time around some of these great teachers. In fact, he visited several times Nisargadatta, the author of I Am That. I don't have a picture of him today, but these days I still marvel at that. Like, I was 19 years old and I met someone who had just been around this master of non-dual teaching. This guy also met the 16th Karmapa and other massively realized people. But I didn't know any of that. And I had just been to a philosophy class at the university, and I was coming in. I don't think I had a shift that day, so I was just coming in to get coffee, and I was just going on and on, blah, blah, blah. You know, it's really interesting. We're reading about Descartes, and I thought I was going to impress the other people at the coffee shop. And I said, Descartes had this thing, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, he said, because if I am mistaken, well, how could that even be? How could there even, that would mean there is no one to be mistaken, or whatever it was. And I cringe at, I guess 19, you're allowed to say things like that. But from the back of the cafe, this guy said, "What? You don't even exist." And anyone else could have said that, I'm sure. And I just would have went, yeah, whatever, buddy. But not this guy. He said it, and my whole being started to fragment for a second. I literally did not know where I was. just everything went blank. He just hit me with that. I heard it. That's when I heard these teachings. And I realize now it was because he knew what he was talking about. This is someone who did understand this. He had, at the very least, acquired the non-dual view, probably while he was in India in the 70s or whatever it was, and probably around Nisargadatta or someone like that. But when he hurled those words at me, they had the weight of thousands of years of people who know the reality here, and it hit. And it never left. I mean, I don't mean that experience never left. That experience left within 10 minutes. But the impact of having heard that, it changed the course of my life. It just, once you encounter this, you know that there's some other layer of reality. You know it. And you're mystified that other people aren't talking about it all the time, because you know that it's somehow true. That's hearing, nyempa. We encounter the idea from a reliable source, and that idea impacts us, and we start to think about it more and more. You haven't heard the teachings until they've impacted you. And now the way I just described my own experience is just, that was the dramatic experience of an 18 or 19-year-old. So it doesn't have to be like that. It does not have to be, you don't have to have some kind of inner thing where everything is shaken up. There are probably people who heard the Dharma or heard this message in a much more chill environment that are way more advanced than I am. But I tend to be dramatic about things, so don't feel that hearing has to feel a certain way, but it has to impact you. That's the key. So we begin by hearing about it, and this is called the stage of hearing, or nyempa. An additional component of the stage of hearing is we begin to take it seriously. We don't just hear it and then, okay, I heard it, and then we move on with our life. We might move on with our life for a couple of days, but later that week, it comes back to us somehow, and we're like, oh yeah, what was that? What was that? We want to find out more at this point. So it doesn't seem that what we heard could be possible, because our parents didn't tell us this, our school teachers didn't tell us this, the government didn't tell us this. And if this were real, wouldn't they all be telling us this? Wouldn't we hear about the non-dual view from our physics teacher or whatever teacher we had in school? Well, you'd think, but we didn't. So we're kind of bred to be skeptical about this. But something in here says, there's something I need to explore about this. This does seem to be real. So it doesn't seem possible, but we feel with great conviction that there's something to it. But we need more information. So this is the point where we begin to read more. These days, we might search for podcasts, and hopefully we find legitimate podcasts. I'll just do a shout out, like the Wisdom podcast from Wisdom Publications. Man, there's some great material there. The Wisdom podcast. Just go and check that out. Amazing stuff. A lot of teachers that I have had the chance to study with are on that podcast, and this is all they're talking about. From a very traditional, learned perspective, of course. So you have a lot of scholars there and neuroscientists who are sort of interested in this. But make sure that you come back to my live streams too, because otherwise you won't hear about more good stuff. So we need more information at that point, because we've got this curiosity that is fueled by something much deeper than curiosity. There's a need to know, because it's like we've heard a piece to the puzzle that wakes us up. It's like our life now has a mission. We kind of didn't have a mission until that moment. We heard these teachings, and now we need to find more. So we read. There's so many things that we can do to acquire information. But what has to happen here? This can end. This can end right here if we don't do this properly. We can just start reading books and it never moves forward. It will move forward if we learn accurately. If we take in knowledge and make sure that we understand what the teachings are saying. We do need to do that. Just because you hear about a math formula doesn't mean that any numbers you write up on the chalkboard are going to compute properly. You have to learn the rules of math, the operations of math. And the non-dual view is not something that we just hear and then it's done. Woo! Not like that. No way. We wouldn't have, 2,500 years of reliable documentation of how people realize the non-dual view if that were the case. There'd be nothing to document. You just hear about it and you're done. But it's not like that. So we begin to really ponder this stuff in earnest. We gather together the teachings and we really try to understand what has been said. We try to figure out, how could this be? Maybe I've misunderstood. So we check. Now, it's obviously the best case scenario if you have someone knowledgeable that you can talk to. You can just ask them questions and get your questions answered. So we're in a really lucky situation if we have someone we can talk to. But if we don't, we have to do the best we can, probably through reading. We take time to read. We read some of the meditation texts, some of the clear ones. And that would be maybe something that we could talk about another time, like what to read. But anyway, hearing happens and we take it seriously. This is accomplishing nyempa, or hearing. And that brings us to what is often called contemplating or reflecting sampa. Once we've heard and we've gathered together the teachings, what is said about the non-dual experience, and we understand, we have a very clear mental model of what it means. So we have subject and object. This is the dualistic experience. Subject means me. That's what subject means, me the seer. Object means anything at all, even thoughts going through my head. I am seeing that. So we sort of get the sense of what subject and object mean, and then what non-duality means in light of that. Does it just mean that these two collapse and the whole world becomes one big ball of light? Is that what it means? No, that isn't what it means. That would be a fantasy. It means something in particular. And in order to understand what it means, we have to start to understand the components of what is experiencing. So we have our sense perceptions that are experiencing the outer objects of the world. And then we have our mind, which has layers. Mind is the place where thoughts happen. Mind is also the place where identity happens. But mind is not the deepest layer of us. We also have what's called awareness. Awareness knows the mind. To have non-dual experience, even to begin to have non-dual experience, we have to learn how to pop into awareness so that we see the mind. The mind is the feeling of self and other, but it's known. And the thing that knows it isn't a self. And that is the very beginning of this experience. It's still very profound if you've never experienced that before. But awareness isn't the ultimate. Awareness has layers too. Awareness has a kind of non-material, non-localized basis, which is in the Tibetan tradition is usually called clarity. And this clarity is something we can position ourselves within. Clarity knows itself. And that is an interesting dimension of experience that for most people will only ever happen through meditation practice. In fact, the later stages of meditation practice are you basically getting into clarity and just being for a session. And man, that's a real practice path. But even clarity isn't the wisdom of awakening. That clarity is like the basis. Awareness and clarity are the basis. We have to be stable within to experience the wisdom beyond those, which has different names. Yeshe is the Tibetan term. Jnana is the Sanskrit term. It just means wisdom, primordial knowing, Buddha nature. The word Mahamudra refers to that. The word Dzogchen refers to that. Clear light is another term. It's often used. Luminosity or Ursel in Tibetan. These are all just the terms that are used for that deeper state. But we've got to have a sense of what it all is. We can't just assume that our little glimpse is it. No, that's how we make mistakes for the rest of our life, by not having the basis of knowledge. We don't have to know everything there is to know, but there is some stuff that we do need to know. If you've been with me in the past at any retreats or anything, you know I call this the minimum effective teachings. Or Dharma. Dharma means the teachings that lead to this. The minimum effective Dharma. We don't have to have everything in our head and in our education, but there's some stuff that we absolutely do, and that's the minimum effective dose of knowledge. So reflecting is when we've put all that together, we start to rotate it in our experience. Like we take a little time off during lunch and we just ponder. We're looking maybe for what is the part of me that is the subject, and what are the parts that are the objects? What is the seer and what is the seen? And we're not just thinking about it, we're trying to experience it. And this takes time. We're learning how to reverse the mind so that it looks in at our inner state. Meditators 10, 15 years down the road are experts in this. Just like when you see someone who's an expert at the piano, as soon as they sit down at the piano and their hands go to the keys, you can kind of tell, oh, they know what they're doing, just the way they drape their hands over the keys. Well, an experienced meditator, they take their seat, they take their posture, and the gaze goes in and just stabilizes. And masters, meditation masters, which would, real masters, not people like me. I wish I were a master, and someday maybe, but there are actual meditation masters in the world, so I should probably just remind us all of that. These are people who at some point in their life, they had a session where their mind went in and it looked at its nature, at its non-dual nature, and then awareness very comfortably kept looking out, and it hasn't changed since then. They've been continuous. That is where we want to get to, but that takes time. That's something that you train to be able to do. Like I keep saying in all these live streams, the notion that some people just do this suddenly is a fantasy. Don't fall for it. The people who are saying that's the case, let's just hope that they're just innocently not understanding that that's not real. It could be that they're just saying that to be seen as enlightened people. That's also possible, especially in this day and age. But don't you be fooled by that. People who attain awakening work at it. It's a high-stakes element of life. It's meaningful. It's a hero's adventure, not just a trinket at the bottom of a Cracker Jacks box. Okay, I think I've probably beaten that horse enough. So we have to learn how to do this, and learning can be frustrating. We can feel like we're always having to call our friend who's helping us with our meditation. We always have the same questions too. What do I do about thoughts? How do I empty my mind? And they're like, you don't do anything about thoughts. Don't try to empty your mind. And we hear the same thing over and over again, but we just don't know how to apply it. But we can't stop. We just can't. We've been bitten. We want to understand. We are completely driven to do this, and that's good. In Buddhism, we call that the birth of bodhicitta, the heart that is turned toward awakening. We are becoming Jedis, and nothing's going to stop that. So good for you. But, of course, the path continues. By contemplating, learning to turn our mind in and experiencing our inner world, we will at some point give birth to an experience. This is sometimes called an aha moment. And in this context, it's a glimpse of a non-dual state of awareness. When this happens, it's a great day. It's a great day, but it's the beginning of something. Again, that's always going to be the message. It's not all going to end with one event. It's these little milestones which feel like huge things for us, and they are, but there's still more ahead. In meditation practice, when we have Nyempa. Oh, what's the previous one? Sampa? Yeah, Sampa. So we have Nyempa, Sampa, and Gompa. Gompa is translated as meditation in most of the texts. Gompa means familiarization. It means becoming familiar with something. So meditation is the art of becoming familiar with whatever we're meditating on, becoming more and more familiar and penetrating into its nature. So Gompa is translated as meditation, but in traditional language, meditation, whatever, that's just a modern term. It's familiarization. And what's happened is we've familiarized ourselves with the words and the ideas that turned us on to this thing, this new non-dual adventure. And then we acquired the teaching, so that the whole thing is like a model in front of us that we can look at. We don't understand it yet, and we haven't experienced it yet, but it means something to us. Somehow we know that we're going to solve this puzzle, and we've got it, and we're beginning to turn it over. We're becoming familiar with it. We're beginning to look in at our own mind and our own inner workings, and we're becoming familiar with those. It will be, for 99% of us, the first time we've ever done that, because we don't live in a meditative culture. Our introspective abilities are just thinking. Occasionally you get people who talk about metacognition, but the metacognition most people are talking about, the meta, some people call that thinking about thinking, is very shallow. It's a very shallow experience compared to what happens in meditation. We don't have this in our culture, but we can develop it just like anyone else in history has been able to develop it. But we do that by this stage of reflection and contemplating this one, Sampa. By contemplating, which includes getting to know the inner workings of our mind and our awareness and our being and our subtle body, all the stuff that we just start to experience, we're familiar with it, and things begin to calm down, because what used to be mysterious or unseen isn't anymore. We kind of know what we are. We don't know the most important thing yet, but we're starting to become comfortable with this, with turning our attention in and experiencing our inner world. And that safety and security one day is going to cause an opening, and we're going to have an aha moment. Maybe the hair stands up on the back of our neck. It could be a number of things. And I'm getting ready to talk about types of aha moments. But that is what we call a glimpse. Now we have gained the view. That's the view. We have experienced it. Going forward, that experience is going to be the North Star of our practice. And we have to be really skillful, because you can't force that glimpse to reappear tomorrow. And if you try to, you fabricate it, and then the whole thing is fake, which we don't want, obviously. So we have to learn to cultivate that glimpse again and again. And, it's worth doing, but it does take skill. The main thing, as I wrote here, that aha moment, that glimpse, it does a lot of things for us. But really the thing that is most important at this stage is we now have trust. We know. We know that we're not crazy, even though no one else has ever heard about this. Our grandparents don't. They wonder, what is that thing you're doing, boy? Why are you sitting there with your eyes closed? Actually, eyes might not be closed. But the point is, we don't doubt anymore. We know. We've had experience. In the Buddhist tradition, the word for this is shraddha, or in Tibetan, depa. And these are really important terms, but they were translated into English with a word that's similar but not identical. And the word that they translated this into is faith. Faith. We now have faith, but it's a very different type of faith than the other types of faith that we've been taught about. We know. We just know. It's not a belief. It's not a belief. It's we know. So then we begin to enter into the training in the view, which, remember the word familiarization? The word meditation in Tibetan is gompa, and gompa means to familiarize yourself with something. We have now had a glimpse of our non-dual nature. It opened up, and we had an aha moment. It probably didn't last long enough for us to get a look around. So we don't know what it's all about. We just know that there is a deeper layer, and that it didn't kill us, and it didn't turn us into maniacs, and the whole world didn't necessarily dissolve away or anything. A new dimension of reality, which includes this everyday dimension of reality, opened up, and we were bigger and vaster for a moment. And now we want to bring that experience that we had into our experience again. That's called Nyam Su Len. Nyam is experience, and Su Len means to bring in, to make it a part of our life. So this aha moment becomes the thing that we start to bring into our life again and again. And it's important to take it slowly here, because particularly if you have a powerful glimpse, good luck. It's going to be a little while for a lot of us before we can even approximate that glimpse again. But we still have to try. We have to keep going. The very next day, we should be on the cushion again, and maybe we won't get the glimpse again. That's probably we won't. And maybe we won't get it the next day either. But at some point, we're going to start to come into that neighborhood again, and we'll know, it's here again. Over time, we will know the way to that glimpse. We will find the path. And there will come a point where you just know it that well. That's called Nyam Su Len, achieving familiarity. Now, when we gain this glimpse again, we're gaining something that we cannot hold We can't make it last. This is not something that follows our orders. This is like grabbing air. You can't do it. So with glimpses of the non-dual state, you foster an inner environment which can allow them to appear, but you can't do anything about holding on to them. Anything that you do causes you to counterfeit that experience. Then you're engaged in self-deception, and you might as well pack it in. So don't do that. You let it arise and last for as long as it will naturally remain. You don't try to sustain it using any effort. It's just like my teacher, Sonia Rinpoche, often, he'll have like a gong, and he'll hit the gong, and people will hear the gong, boom, tapers off. Once you've hit the gong, you can't really cause it to sustain. It's not an electronic device where you can just press a button and it sustains. It's a physical device. The sound decays. You can hit it again, but then it's going to sound and then decay again. That's the way these glimpses will be for us. We have to understand that. That's the meaning of non-meditation. We enter into non-meditation when we are able to have a glimpse of our non-dual experience, and we let go of trying to manipulate it, and we just let it happen. How long is it going to happen? Well, we're supposed to say that, everyone's going to be different. For some people, it could happen a little longer, for some a little shorter, but in just about every case, it's going to be somewhere between 3 and maybe 15 seconds. So don't think that you're going to have a glimpse and it's going to last for 20 minutes. That's why you set up 30 minutes or 45 minutes or 60 minutes to meditate, so that you can pile up those naturally occurring glimpses, one after another. So you know how to invoke it at that point, and then you let it last, and then it trails away, and you find yourself thinking about a sandwich, and you realize, oh, I've lost the view. And then you invoke it again, and you let it last, and now you're thinking about the weather, and you realize, oh, I've lost it again. So you're not doing anything, you're not meditating, but you definitely are cheating yourself if you aren't setting up training sessions so you can pile those things up. And, it's nothing unusual at all of people who've been doing this for a while to do this for 2 hours at a stretch, just sitting there in their meditation room, sitting in meditation posture doing this, familiarizing themselves with the non-dual view. Because that's what brings the results. That's how you stabilize this kind of thing. All right. So this is called familiarity. And we're getting to the end here. Now there's 2 kinds of glimpses. Maybe there's more than 2 kinds, but there are, having been a meditator for a long time and having been a meditation teacher for a long time, there are 2 main types of experiences that people report. And so we're going to talk about those. And the first one is kind of this is sort of like maybe the one that everybody wants, or people read about. They read spiritual books and they hear about this kind of thing. And this is what to them has to happen for them to have had a non-dual glimpse. So I'm just going to talk about it. It's called naked awareness. Naked awareness could be that you're meditating and you're trying to look at the inner landscape. You're seeing the mind, you're seeing the self think about things, and you are like not exactly the self looking at things. It's just like, wow, what's going on here? This is maybe a new dimension. And then everything dissolves and there's just this luminosity born within, like a light at the very center of your being that just shines and knows. And then it fades. It's gone. Maybe for years, but the impact is lasting. You had a glimpse of naked awareness. It is a type of glimpse, just a type of glimpse. Not everybody has this, and it doesn't mean that there's something special about you. It has more to do with your inner channels and the condition that they're in on that day. You've contemplated, you've set up all of the conditions, and you're ready, and then your winds, your inner channels just kind of react in such a way where your senses completely, your sense perceptions completely relax, and all of the data, all of the accumulated grasping of this and that just dissolves for a second, and the light within you, the light of awareness, shines, and nothing else is there. It sounds so wonderful, right? Great. It's a glimpse. It's a very important thing that can happen in your life. It's called a glimpse of naked awareness. But there's another type of glimpse too, and this is called a glimpse of non-dual awareness, just like the previous one, only with appearances. So everything stays as it is. You could be eating a sandwich and this could happen, but you shift into a perspective. And this, I want to be careful with how I phrase this. In our general state, there's a foreground and a background. The foreground is all the stuff that we are experiencing, and the sense of me is the background. The background is seeing the foreground. That's just a general dualistic state. Most of us are in that most of the time, and our parents are always in that, right? This is a situation where the background, the feeling of self, shifts into the foreground. So what was in the foreground, the stuff that the self is seeing, is in the foreground still, but so is the self that's seeing it. And the awareness that is seeing that isn't in the background, and it's everywhere, it's nowhere, it's somehow things are being seen, but there's not an identifiable seer. And this isn't the experience of it for someone who is prepared, which is all the stuff I've been talking about. It isn't scary. It's relaxing. It's peaceful. It's very similar to having a lucid dream. If you're someone who's lucky enough to have had a lucid dream, you suddenly are awake within the dream, and you see your dream self running through the dream jungle, being chased by a dream elephant. But it's all a dream, and there's no fear. There's just the experience. Now, usually, if you have a lucid dream, as soon as you recognize it, you wake up and the damn thing ended right as you were beginning to have this insight. That's how it goes for most people with lucid dreams. You can try to train yourself to sustain it a little bit or a lot. That definitely takes work, though. It has to become a project. But in this situation, a glimpse of non-dual awareness with appearances, everything remains as it is, but you become lucid in a new way, right within your experience. This is not as dramatic as this previous one. Naked awareness, everything dissolves. You're just a dynamo of luminous knowingness. That seems dramatic, but this is more useful. This is more important, because that other one, that's going to be an event. It's not going to happen all the time. If it did, you'd drive off the road. You got to put your seatbelt on for that one. Not this one. This is the functional experience of what's called holding the view. When you are able to have non-dual awareness with appearance, your path of deepening and familiarizing yourself with all of this can happen for the rest of your life. You can learn to shift into this, and when it fades, you shift back into it. And there's never really a reason not to shift into it. But this takes this thing that I talked about earlier, bodhicitta, the longing to awaken, the mind that turns towards awakening. As bodhicitta develops, you have more and more, what's the word? Not verve. Is it verve? More zeal to continue to bring into your experience this non-dual dimension of yourself. You wake up in the morning, you get your coffee, you're looking at your calendar, you're not in this non-dual thing. But then it occurs to you, whoa, there's this other part of my life. Oh, right. And then there it is. You let it remain. And again, this is just like the other one. You don't force this. You learn to invoke it, and there's an art to doing that. You really need to learn that from a teacher. You can come to our retreats at Finding Ground and definitely learn that. But the point is there's a delicate touch, a way of invoking this that allows you to naturally sustain it. And that's what you begin to do throughout your life, but definitely in meditation sessions. Even though you might not be meditating during these sessions because you're non-meditating at that point. Megom. Gom is meditation and Megom is non-meditation. Non-meditation means you're not doing anything. But that doesn't mean that nothing is happening. You're not doing anything because doing anything would prevent something very important from happening. And you are now at the stage, which you weren't always at, where something very important is happening. The non-dual view is surfacing. It wasn't before. You needed to do meditation because, frankly, nothing's happening. If you don't make stuff happen, follow the breath, generate loving kindness, that kind of thing. If you aren't generating experience, then nothing's going to happen because you're not ready to give birth to a glimpse of non-duality. But once you are, you're in a different situation. Now this is where some traditions say that first glimpse is called ascertaining the path. Now you actually have a path. A real path that leads to deep awakening. Previously, you were looking for the path. You were on a preliminary path. You're practicing mindfulness. You're generating love and loving kindness and compassion. These are all good things, but it's not the same thing as when you actually have the view. That's the path that leads to transformative insight. So, let's see where we are here. I bet this is it. It is. That's it. So if you have any questions, no one has asked any questions here, but we'll pick up from here next time. Now, if you do have any questions, ask them, and I will respond to them. Next time, we're going to talk about how this glimpse begins to unfold, how the path progresses from here. So be sure to tune into that one. That's usually what people want to know. Also, don't just think about the Dharma. Don't just think about this type of practice. Engage it. come to our retreat. It's happening at the end of the month. I think that there's a link in the description. There's a little discount code you can come to, and you can learn with us. We've done this 22 times in the last 2 years. This will be our 23rd Finding Ground weekend workshop, and they're fantastic. We go through all the actual practical elements of this, and people love them, and I think you will love them too. So I hope to see you there. And otherwise, I will see you on Monday, where we go into number 3, how it progresses. That's what we'll do next time. So thank you all for your participation tonight. Thank you for helping me sync the audio. I'll see you soon. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye.